For episode 11, in the case of Riot of the Stingers, he's about to have a reunion with his father after so many years of estrangement and bitterness. I'll explain why in a minute, but first of all, the story begins at Riot's father's house in the backyard, where the pool is. That's Riot's father. He's reading his newspaper, and sitting across from him is Mildred, who's Riot's mother. You can tell that Riot's father's not exactly happy when he read his newspaper and he crumbled it up. So Mildred tries to calm him down the best way she knew how, by saying, "Now come on, now you said you're going to relax a little." So Riot's father asked his wife a question. How can I just relax like this when the whole world is falling apart? That's when minutes later their son Riot shows up and with their first album is a gift for his mother, Mildred. Well, Mildred, who's Riot's mother, was glad to see him, but the only person that's not is Riot's father. So after Mildred told Riot, "Well, having you here again is present enough," so Riot's mother went ahead and opened a gift from him. It's the first singers record that the band had ever did. Oh, by the way, in this episode, we get to see how the singers became a band, but that will be explained later. So anyway, his father, Riot's father, pleaded a case by asking, "How dare you come back after 5 years?" And then Riot pleaded his case to say, "I thought you'd be happy to see that I had succeeded. You call this succeeding?" Rice's father asked. Next thing you know, both of the men were arguing with each other, and the last straw that broke the camel's back is when Rice's father took the record that the Stingers had made and threw it into the pool. That made Riot upset, and so after that he stormed off. After Riot stormed off, it is now Riot's mother's turn to plead a case with Riot's father to understand her son a little better and etc. That's when she realized that you can tell she's not feeling very well and she suddenly collapsed in the backyard. So later that night at the Stingers Sound Record Company, now remember that's the record company that the Stingers now own since 9 episodes ago. And guess what? The holograms are being invited to their success party. The Stingers, that is, since they now made their first record. Jim, however, told the holograms the reason why they're being invited in the first place is that the Stingers want to share the success. Or Shayna, as she says in her case, to brag about it. So finally, Jim and the holograms had made it to the rooftop of Stinger Sound. Everybody was there. And as you can tell, the holograms are not the only ones. We have Connie from season 2, episode 3. She's there. We have Video, or Vivian for short. She's there. And also Lindsay Pierce. And let's not forget the three celebrities from 2 seasons ago, Johnny Deacon, Ronnie Cox, and Lena Lerner. So Jim made a suggestion to her bandmates that she can go say hello to Riot for a while, and so they agreed. So when Jim said hello to Riot, you can tell he's in very depressive mood. So he said hello to Jim for a while, and then he heads to the bowl to where the punch is. So we go to the Take It or Leave It song by the Stingers from 10 episodes ago. It was during the entire song that Riot had lately had been depressed since after the fight that he had with his father at his father's house earlier that day. And everybody that was there at the party can tell that something was off with Riot and they didn't know why. So after the song came to an end, that's when Riot heard the sound of his father's voice saying to the guard, "I don't care if I don't have an invitation," and forced his way in to see his son and told his son the bad news that Mildred, who's Riot's mother, is in the hospital. In fact, after claiming the case that it was all Riot's fault, that's when Riot's father punched him in the face. Before Riot's father got escorted out by a couple of guards, he claimed the case that it was all Riot's fault and that he shouldn't have showed up and etc. So after Riot's father got escorted out, Minx and Rapture of the Stingers had no idea that Riot even had a father or has told them about it until they found out at the last minute. So Jim, who shows up minutes later, wants to know if Riot's okay. He said, "I'll be fine. He just found out about his mother in the hospital thanks to his father showing up at the last minute and told him the news." So Jim suggested to take Riot to the hospital so that he could see his mother. At first Riot said it wasn't necessary, but Jim insisted anyway. So both of them head to the Memorial Hospital. So, when Jim and Riot went inside, thanks to the nurse, they went to see Mildred in her hospital room at the ICU. So Riot was asking the nurse at the ICU if his mother Mildred is going to be okay. The nurse said that she wasn't sure of it, but rest assured she'll run some tests in the meantime. So Riot was holding his mother Mildred's hand, and pleaded his case that he blamed it on his father. And so Jim agrees to let Riot be with his mother for a while. And she says, if you need me, I'll be downstairs in the coffee shop. And so she heads off. So later, when Jim went downstairs to the coffee shop, she's face to face with Riot's father. And so she sits down next to him and she said, you must be Riot's father. That's correct, he said. And you're the person that was at my son's party earlier tonight. That's correct, Jim said. So Jim apologized for Mildred's condition since she heard the news. And of course, Riot's father pleaded his case to say it was his son's fault, and if he hadn't showed up in the first place, then Mildred shouldn't be in the hospital. So Jim told Riot's father, you know you shouldn't blame your son for what he did. Well, Riot's father said, when he explained in his case when he started having flashbacks of his own. So Riot's father explained to Jim in the present scene that how he wanted to have a family of his own and to live a peaceful environment, or so he thought. Of course, Riot's father also explains that how he and his son used to spend some time together, going on picnics and etc. But then when things changed, then back to the present in the coffee shop, that's when Riot's father began to explain to Jim that ever since Riot became a musician, they were drifting further and further apart. As Riot's father and Jim continued to have a conversation with each other, they didn't notice that Riot has just passed them by after leaving his mother's hospital room. So Jim told Riot's father that she had to leave, and so she left the hospital's coffee shop. Then she ran outside to catch up with Riot. So after Jim ran up to catch up with Riot, she wants to know where he's going. Even though Riot said that he isn't sure where he's going, but Jim can understand what he's going through. So Jim suggested that she should take Riot home, but Riot told her it wasn't necessary. Oh, come on, don't be silly. I would like to. And so they both agreed. So meanwhile, at Riot's apartment, so Riot went ahead and poured himself and Jim at least a couple cups of coffee, and then he sits down with Jim. But before Riot can sit down with Jim, he was curious to know if Jim was ever close to her late dad, and of course, her sister's late dad. I'm talking about Kimber. So Jim confessed that yes, they were. Now, Riot, as he sat down across the way from Jim, now you can tell that he just couldn't help but what's going on in his head. So Riot confessed to Jim that he and his father used to be very close, but lately he's entitled to his own opinions. So being curious, Jim wants to know from Riot what happened. Well, you see, Riot said, well, it was my own mistake that led his own father to entitle his own opinions when flashback, it started when Riot was only just a child when he had piano lessons with his mother once upon a time. But then, when young Rory, who was young Riot at the time, was caught by his own father, that's when his father punished him and made the case in front of his own wife, Mildred, that no son of his is going to play that piano because Riot's father made the case that piano playing is for women. And so after that, young Rory, aka Riot, went off crying. Then, as time went on, Riot explains that when he got older, that's when his mother at the time got him his first guitar and he wanted to play it against a tree. So that's what he did. That was until, just like before, Riot's father came to him, grabbed the guitar, and says, I thought I told you, and I told you once before, I'm not going to let a son of mine play that guitar. So you know what Riot's father did? He threw the guitar on the ground, breaking it to pieces. And Riot knew that this was the beginning of the worst. And the worst of it all, as Riot explains in the present scene, that his father at that time wanted to make sure that Riot will never succeed in his life, achieve his dreams, so to speak, went back to the present in Riot's apartment. Jim just told Riot that your father must be serious about this. When Riot saw that Jim was shivering, he asked her, are you cold? I can build a fire if you like. And so that's what he did. He went to the fireplace and built himself a fire in the fireplace. So as Riot was building a fire, he told Jim that his father never understands that how his music was his only means of escape. Escape from reality, if you will. Then Riot also explains how he and his family have been moving around a lot, and he had to give up on his old friends while he's growing up. And every year they would move around to one town after another. But through it all, Riot explains, at least he has his mother who could support him in a way. But Riot said that there's only one problem. His mother's just not strong enough to stand up against his own father. Riot also said that his own father just wanted him to be a military man, just like his father once was, once upon a time. So, flashback, that's exactly what Riot did when he went to Germany and Europe. So, it was during that time when Riot joined the army, just like his father did. He did everything from basic training to obstacle courses, everything that he did, just like what his father once did. Then back to the present in Riot's apartment. That's when Jim told Riot, "Oh wow, that's terrible." But that's not all, Riot said. He then said that ever since he enlisted in the army, just like his father was, he hated it. In fact, he despised it. Then Riot also explains that he thought for a minute he was going to be stuck in the army life for the rest of his life, or so he thought, until one fateful day when flashback, when Nirvana came to play one day in Europe. Of course, Riot was more than happy to attend every one of the Nirvana shows, and every time they would go and play, that's what Riot figured that's what he should be, a musician. The leader of the band is named Jerry, and the keyboardist was Phoebe, aka Minx. Anyway, as a matter of fact, Rice said in the present scene that Nirvana was doing well, or so he thought so. Then one day, one of the bandmates was showing up late, and Jerry didn't like it at least a bit. So you know what he did? He fired the bandmate right on the spot by telling him, and I quote, "If you don't show up on time, then don't show up at all." So after the bandmate got disgusted and left, that's when Phoebe, aka Minx, wants to know from Jerry what we're gonna do now. We can't go on without a guitarist that's taking his place. And suddenly, both Jerry and Phoebe, aka Minx, just heard Riot's voice said, "Maybe I can help with that." So Jerry wants to know for Riot, what kind of an army guy like you wants to play guitar? How can you pull this one off? Well, Riot says, watch and learn. So Riot went ahead and gave it his all and played the guitar, while the rest followed in. So finally, after the band finished their set, the audience cheered. And of course, Phoebe, aka Minx, just made a suggestion to Jerry by saying, "This guy's good." So Phoebe, aka Minx, made Jerry a suggestion. Maybe he should be with a band with us. So Jerry was asking Riot, who was Rory at the time, if he would join up for the European tour. At first, Riot, aka Rory, hesitated, and then he had a second thought. It says, "Okay, I'm in." And so that's what happened. And so Rory became Riot. That was his stage name. And that's the name that Riot said in the present scene that he came up with. And that's what he stuck with for the rest of his life. Went back to the present in Riot's apartment. As the fire dies down in the fireplace, that's when Riot told Jim it was a great escape, the biggest thrill, something I have never felt before. Then Jim said to Riot, "I see exactly what you mean." Then Riot says, "Wait, I thought Nirvana was doing well. We went all over Europe when flashback. That was until when Riot came back to Germany. That's when he realized he was in serious trouble for leaving the army for far too long. So because of his punishment for being AWOL, that means he has to be leaving from the army, this time forever." Then back to the present in Riot's apartment. That's when Jim says, "Oh, wow." So Riot explains that by the time he got arrested, that's when, as a result of being punished for leaving the army, he had to be dishonorably discharged. Then flashback after the dishonorable discharge, Riot was forced to move back to his parents' house. And as Riot explains in the present scene, he was left to wonder how he's going to break this news to his mother, and worst of all, his own father when he came back. Now you can tell that Riot's father got very angry with his own son for having the nerve to return home after that dishonorable discharge. So that left the result of Riot leaving home forever, for good, and never looking back. So now homeless, as Riot explains in the present scene, he decided to work odd jobs to work his way up, to earn money to go back to Europe. And when he eventually did, he returned back to Nirvana right after his arrest. Even though Jerry allowed Riot to come back if he promised to do some more concert tours, and so that's what Riot did. Then Riot also explains that Nirvana was doing well. In fact, Riot also says that the moment he joined the band, he made a vow that nothing and no one's going to take control of his life ever again. Or so he thought. That was until one fateful day during band practice, Jerry just told Riot, "I thought I told you to stay in backup." But Riot made his case to Jerry to say, "I can do something that's even better than that." So what Riot told Jerry, in his case, he wants to take over the band. But Jerry got upset and said, "Wait a minute, you can't just take over the band like that." So even though Phoebe, aka Minx, decided to side with Riot instead of Jerry, so as the final insult, that's when Riot told Jerry that since you feel that way, that I guess I had to form my own band. So as a result, that's when Riot walked out. But he's not alone. Phoebe, aka Minx, joined him, and they both walked out from the backstage. So after that, I'm not sure when Rapture came into play, but she joined up with Minx and Riot, and so thus the Stingers were born. Of course, Riot explains that he and his bandmates went to every club in Europe, but there's a problem. No one can take them. Then Riot in the present scene continued to explain that it's extremely difficult for him and his bandmates to play out on the streets when they don't have a lot of money. Still, according to what Riot said in his case, he and his bandmates are continuing to play out to earn a little money as they could. And to make that case clear, we go into It's a Hard, Hard Life song by the Stingers. So throughout the entire song, the Stingers went everywhere from France to Italy to England to Germany to Switzerland, pretty much throughout Europe. But they're determined to make it no matter what, despite some hardships on the way. Eventually, Stingers had every fan there was everywhere they went. So when the song came to an end, it was in the dressing room that Minx just told her bandmates the good news. There's an invitation at the Cool Clock Club from 10 episodes ago. And of course, that's where they met the holograms, Eric Raymond, and of course the Misfits. And so the rest they say is history and back to the present at Riot's apartment. After Jim woke up, she says, "Oh man, I've been up all night." And of course, Riot apologizes for it. So Jim told Riot, "I can understand now why you are the way you are." So Riot tells Jim, "Oh, that reminds me, I gotta go back to the hospital because he said he has to find out how his mother's doing." "I understand," Jim says, and suggested that she should take him. But Riot says, "You don't have to if you don't want to." "But I must," Jim said. "It's the least I can do." So after Riot gave Jim a compliment, they both left the apartment. Meanwhile, at the hospital's ICU with Mildred and Riot's father, who was with her, holding her hand, saying, "You're going to be okay. Just hang in there." And then he tells her, "Don't worry, you'll be out of here in a couple of days." But when Riot's father saw his son and along with Jim went into the hospital's ICU, that's when he stood up, looked at him, and said, to quote, "leave the room immediately," but Rice says, "I don't think so. Mildred's my mother. I'm staying." "Did you hear what I said?" Riot's father asked, and then demanded Riot to leave the room. And that's when both of the men were fighting with each other. So it's now up to the doctors to break up the fight, as Mildred saw it happen while she's lying in bed. By the time that the doctor saw that Mildred had flatlined, he looked at the two men and said, "You see what you two did?" So it's now up to a group of doctors to bring Mildred to life. Things look hopeless and very bad for her. Good news, the team of doctors just brought Mildred to life. "Well, she's stable for now," one of the doctors said. But now Jim, Riot, and his father were left to wonder how much longer Mildred's going to live, and they're not so sure of it. So all of them said, "Doctor?" And that's when the doctor says, "I'm sorry, but until Mildred recovers, I'm afraid you three will have to leave this room. So I can't let you see her until then." And so all three of them left the hospital room. So after leaving the hospital, that's when Riot and his father began arguing with each other. So Riot's father goes first to speak in his case to say, "I hope you're proud of yourself." Then Riot told his father, "You don't have to yell at me." Well, Jim pleaded her case to demand the two men to stop fighting this minute, and that she said that fighting's never going to solve anything. So, but then Riot's father continues to yell at his son to say, I wouldn't be yelling at you if you hadn't showed up. Then Riot says, true. Mildred, meaning his own mother, wouldn't be sick had his father had not been yelling at him. Well, that made Jim annoyed and upset and says, oh, you two are so impossible. So as Starlight mentions living room, that's when Jim says, I can't believe these two. After all these two have been through, I have never been so angry and annoyed in all my life. I just can't get these two to get along. Then Rhea tells Jim, it's too bad if you had only spoke with Riot's mother, then maybe she has something to say about it. So Jim, after following Rhea's suggestion, she says, well, by golly, you're right. That's just what I'll do. So Jim heads back to the hospital. So meanwhile, there at the hospital's ICU, that's when Jim, thanks to Synergy, went undercover as the hospital's nurse. And then she overheard the two doctors talking to each other as they left Mildred's room. As the doctors were leaving Mildred's room, they were talking to each other how Mildred won't respond to medications, that she'll be more in danger if she didn't help herself, and etc. So Jim goes into Mildred's room to speak with her. After Jim went inside Mildred's room, that's when Jim wants to know from Riot's mother how she's feeling. I feel a little tired, Riot's mother said. I'm so tired of always keeping the family together while I just fall apart. And then she fell right back into consciousness, back to sleep in her hospital bed. So after talking to Riot's mother, Jim left the hospital's ICU. So, meanwhile, back at Riot's father's house, that's when Jim went to see Riot's father, and she found him all right in the backyard. So Riot's father wants to know from Jim, what are you doing here? Did Riot put you up to this? No, I came by myself, Jim says. It's about Mildred, your wife. Is she. Then Riot's father paused for a minute, thinking she must have died in a hospital. But Jim says, no, no, she's still alive, but she doesn't have much time to live. Then Jim asked Riot's father a question. Don't you know what you two are doing to her? You're tearing her apart with all this fighting and arguing that you two have had over the years. This has got to stop. It's about time you two made up. Then Riot's father pleaded his case to say, this is not my fault. Then Riot's father pleaded his case of how his son was a weak one and how he's been joining the band and everything else. What kind of guy that is so undisciplined to form a band of his own? Well, Riot didn't do it because he was weak and undisciplined, Jim said. Besides, he didn't become a musician just because of those things, Jim said. He did it because he wanted to believe in himself. And not just that, but also his family. He wanted to succeed in life, Jim said. I'm sure he did, Rice's father said. It's true, Jim said, because somewhere along the line, someone once told him, don't give up, don't quit, because he wants to stand up for what he believed in. Then Jim asked Rice's father a question. Weren't you aware that in the last 6 months that all Riot did was struggle and to make money while he was in the streets? He did that because he wanted to believe in his bandmates that they can succeed in life once they put their minds to it. They did? Rice's father asked. They sure did, Jim said. Also, Jim told Rice's father that someone once told him to fight for what you believe, and that's exactly what Riot did. He didn't want to quit. He never gave up. He fought for what he believed in, and so that's what he did. So you see, Jim said, if it wasn't for Riot and his hard work, and had he had given up, he wouldn't be where he is right now. So I was wondering if you could do a favor for me and just see your son at his next concert. At first, Ryan's father hesitated and then refused. Before Jim left, she told Ryan's father one last thing. At least do it for your wife. It's at least you can do. That's all I have to say about it. Then after that, Jim left Ryan's father's house. Back at Riot's apartment, that's when Jim went to see Riot. That's when Jim, when she went inside, she accidentally let slip to tell Riot that she went to see his father today. You did what? Riot asked. Why? Then Jim explains and said that Riot and his father need to start making up. if Riot's mother was able to live long enough to see them both do that. And so Jim begged him by asking this question: "Don't you want your mother to live? Don't you want to make up with your father?" "Why should I?" Riot asked. "He never gave me a chance, so why should I? I never forgave him then, so why should I now?" So Riot told Jim, "My dad will never understand, and I don't think he ever will." "I know," Jim says, "but at least try." So later that night at the Stingers concert, Riot's father did what Jim suggested and attended at the concert the way it's planned. Then one of the Stingers fans who was sitting next to Riot's father says, "Hey, give me a hand." But Riot's father dismisses him and says, "Why don't you just get yourself a job?" "A job? Oh my goodness. I think you made a mistake, sir. What I'm trying to say is, I want to shake your hand." Then Riot's father says, "Oh, my bad. I'm sorry." So Riot's father was asking one of the Stingers fans, "So the Stingers are popular now, right?" "Yeah, haven't you heard?" the fan asked. "Riot's the best. Just watch, you'll see." And so the concert went as planned. And so the audience cheered while the Stingers did their song, "Let Me Be." It was during that song that Riot's flashbacks came into play, from when he was a child into a young man that he is right this minute. And then before you know it, the entire audience lit their lighters as the Stingers continued to play. Finally, when the song came to an end, the audience cheered. So after the concert ended, Riot's father told the guard that he needs to see his son right away, but the guard wouldn't allow it. So Riot's father says, "You don't understand. Riot's my son." And the guard says, "Oh, sure, and Madonna's my sister, right?" And that's when Jim shows up and says, "Let him pass, officer. He's Riot's father." And then the guard looks at Jim and says, "Are you sure? No kidding? Then why didn't you say so?" So the guard agreed to take Riot's father to the dressing room. So later in the dressing room, that's when Riot's father shows up with Jim. And Riot says, "Dad, is that you?" So Riot's father made an omission with his own son to say, "I had no idea that you had so much talent and that fans had loved you." And so, as you may have guessed it, Riot can see that his father had finally changed. So Riot was asking his father, has he seen the concert? Not only did Riot's father say that he did, but then Riot's father asked Riot a question. "What do you say we stop by to the hospital and we can visit your mother?" "I would like that very much," Riot said, and so that's what the three of them did. So meanwhile at the hospital's ICU, both Riot and his father went to see Mildred in her hospital room, and they both said, "Mildred, Mom, if you can hear us, please wake up." So Riot's father goes first to speak in his case to say that he's been acting like a jerk and he apologized. Then Riot tells his mother that "You're important to both of us." Then Rice's father said, "Please say you'll get well so you can come home to both of us. I don't care if it's going to take us for the rest of our lives. We just want you to forgive us for what happened earlier." Not only did Mildred forgive the two men, but she promised that as soon as she gets well, she'll come home to both of the men. And that made Jim very happy to see that all three of them hugged. So you know what this means. Both father, son, and mother had all made up in the hospital room. So that ends episode 11.